The reason they like reading my stuff is that I've always got real life examples to prove what I'm saying.
There's a lot of good people that listen to this podcast.
Other than God and my family, deer hunting would be next in line on my list of priorities.
From the bottom of our hearts, it's just fantastic and awesome to have the support that you guys are getting.
People ask me about expandable broadheads and love swings.
Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to Chasing Giants, brought to you by Osseo Gear, episode 109. Don, we have another live crowd at our second weekend of master classes, and we got a big group here tonight.
Yeah, we got a bunch of rowdies in here. I think this is going to be a great podcast.
Yep. So we're gonna introduce a couple people. Dwayne Hopkins, the head seedsman of Real World, is here. If we get too much of a brain buster question about food plot stuff, we might just say divert and tell him to come up here and answer it. But we had an interesting saying on there over lunch today about Dwayne, and I said that even though Don's on the cover of the bag, Dwayne's on the inside of the bag.
His knowledge built this company, so we'll forever be indebted to him, and we all turn to him from time to time with our questions as well. So great resource.
The mastermind of what's inside of that bag is here tonight. So you're all as master class students. He's going to be here tomorrow too for a part of the day. And that's a resource that we just we couldn't get anywhere else. He basically helped build this brand. We have another guest here, Mr. Teets, and his bride are here. He owns is it B&M? Is that right? B&M, huh? Yeah, B&M Custom Venison. They keep me with my deer sausage and bacon all year. But good friends of ours, they ran a contest the last 2 years at their processing plant about an hour away from here that for a big buck check-in. So I invited them to come up, and they brought us some beef sticks.
And they make some of the best around.
Yep. So we're glad that they're here. And then Rich Hickson and his two kids are here tonight. Rich is a Real World dealer over on the east side of Ohio. He came up to pick up his dealer order and has got his kids here, and I think they got some brain buster questions for you tonight.
Well, they brought their notebooks, so
she's
be standing there for a while in front of the mic.
Yeah, I think we're in for a lot of questions from them tonight, and we got about 30 of our guests from the master classes here. But the segment that I'm most excited about is your good friend Joe Johnson is here and got a headset on. I'm going to let you introduce him. And Joe is all things shed hunting this time of year, and I want to talk a little shed hunting tonight.
Yeah, I've known Joe for about 40 years. He's a shed hunting fool. I'm telling you what. I don't think anybody has walked more miles just looking for deer antlers than Joe. And he's just been a great friend as well. And you guys might remember him from the Joey buck. He found the sheds of the buck I shot in 2020. The second buck I shot in 2020 after Mel was a buck that Joe turned me on to. He found the sheds, and then I started putting trail cameras out trying to track that buck down. And by the time I got the buck shot, Joe had found 3 complete sets off of that buck. And that's just kind of a perfect example of how much ground this guy covers looking for shed antlers. So glad to have you with us, Joe.
Well, glad to be here and take anybody's questions and Terry's, and we'll answer them how we can.
So the first question I got is, how many sheds have you found this year so far?
Yeah, just 44 right now.
So is that a big year so far, or are you on track?
February was my best year. I got 32 in February and got them pretty early in February because we had a cold spell, and I had a good food source, thankfully, of my brother-in-law. So
yeah,
and they all started flocking into there, and sad part is there's probably that many more still out in the corn stalks that I haven't located yet. So
that's a great topic that I want to talk about a little bit, because I'm probably the worst shed hunter ever known to man, because I don't even look If I see one driving back the ridge on the farm, I'll pick it up. But outside of that, I don't have time this time of year with the responsibilities I have at home and other places that I can spend a lot of time. What are some different tips and tricks of either places you look, or how do you grid, or do you use binoculars and look? Give us a little couple ideas that you use to find all these things.
Yeah, I mean, binoculars is just a no-brainer. You got to carry binoculars with you because, I mean, we got a lot of open ag country here. You know, a lot of bean stubble fields that, you know, are excellent where they could drop. But, you know, I'm an edge person. I love to hunt edges. I very seldom go look back into the timbers. Now, if you had a couple timbers that were with an ag field through the middle, you know, and they had timbers on each side of it, and there was trails, you know, I might look for the trails, but I like edges, waterways around our areas, and we're so, you know, small timber areas around all of our areas here, and then we got bigger ag fields, so, you know.
Yeah. So Don, what's other techniques? Because really outside, you found some sheds. You can talk a little bit about that. You were frost seeding clover, and you picked up a couple this week. But outside of that, we really only shed hunt this farm one time a year.
Well, you know, there's a couple of sponsors we could plug right here. Joe mentioned the binos, Vortex Optics, you know, comes in right there, but also the Quiet Cat. You know, you can cover a lot of field edges on a Quiet Cat bike, and that's another good tool. But, yeah, I'm not a big shed hunter. Like, I mean, if I find 20 in a year, that's a fantastic year for me. And I find more on clients' properties than I do my own.
Because you're out walking them more.
Every day, yeah. So.
Yeah, the interesting thing about when we shed hunt this property, you know, the attendees of the master class are going to see we're out in the middle of open ag and kind of this central location. But we don't just start at one end and walk all the way to the other. Why don't you explain a little bit about how we shed hunt this, just to try not to push deer crazy off of your property at 90 miles an hour?
Right. So when we look for shed antlers here, we do it one time. We do it right after the last master class. Usually the last class will be on a Saturday. And then usually you and my daughter and son-in-law and grandsons are here. And we will line up and we'll comb the sanctuary, but we start at a certain location and push partway through the property, and then we'll back out and we'll go clear around the section with trucks and start from the other direction and push the deer back into the sanctuary. So we kind of got a method to our madness, if you will.
Yes, if you have access to a farm to hunt it, you can also use those multiple accesses to shed hunt it and push your deer basically back and forth versus trying to push them off the property.
Right.
Joe, timing of the year, I know there's properties that you shed hunt that you actually don't hunt. So you're not necessarily as concerned about intrusion as Don would be here on his home farm. But when do you actually start looking for sheds?
You know, it's the first week in February, second week is my target to really get started. I mean, if we have a real super nasty January, late January is...
Yeah, weather could affect that, yeah.
Yeah. Weather is definitely a factor.
When will you stop shed hunting?
It's already slowed down for me because, you know, we got a 70-degree day yesterday or so, and when I start sweating so much that I can't, I got to go in twice and change everything. It's about time.
Now, one of the bucks that you're tracking on this farm, Don, you did find one. Was it only one side? Did you find this week?
I found both sides of one buck.
Okay.
I found one side to the 9.5-year-old.
One of them was really chewed up.
Yeah, it sit there a while.
So we have a little theory about that. We'd rather an antler be chewed up and almost destroyed by rodents than putting too much pressure on your property by being in there and trying to find it as soon as it drops.
I'd rather kill that buck than find a shed. So.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of other ways that you can find them, but I think, Joe, if I'm not mistaken, you just got to cover the ground and spend the time, right?
Yeah. You know, with our kind of territory we got around here, you know, you you got to move.
Yep.
And I'm fortunate in my area. I've been there so many years that I got a lot of good neighbors, and
Yep.
you know,
or maybe be one of the row crop farmers putting fertilizer or something down now and driving out across the field and gridding it with a tractor. You could keep an eye out. But
you know, when I started shed hunting 50 years ago or so, nobody even considered looking for a shed. They just was thinking you were nuts, you know. So.
Well, Dawn and I went to the tractor dealer this morning, and we saw a set of tires for a combine. How much were they?
20 grand.
20 grand for a set of tires. So I'm assuming that the row crop farmers would not mind you out looking for antlers in their cornfields if a set of tires cost 20 grand. So, all right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. I don't want to start the podcast out in too much of a somber mood, but our segment presented by Matthews on Lester's Feet is going to have basically a tribute to a young girl named Mia Thomas from Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, she lost her battle with cancer on March 13th. So we're going to take just a quick break and play a tribute video in honor of her. This little kid fought almost her whole life against cancer, and her mom, Dan, and Amy just continue to keep them in your prayers. Lester's Feet was able to get with them pretty late in the journey, but was able to really, with the help of the donors, able to take some of their financial burden away from them and let them really focus on the last few months that Mia was with us before she went to be with Jesus. So let's watch this segment brought to us by Matthews. Well, like I said, kind of a little bit of a somber part, but we talk about these families, and last week we were sitting here in the master class and got a text from one of our other families that they'd just taken a girl to emergency room, and they asked us to pray, and we actually stopped the master class right where we were at and stop talking about deer hunting just long enough to bow our heads and pray for that little girl. She's doing well. But I'm happy to announce that the raffle is now open. The website is open. I'm going to put the information in the bottom of this link so we can officially open up sales for the raffle. And for our Amish friends, I'm going to, that's listening on MTech, I'm going to put an ad in the May Busy Beaver. We talked to them today. So the Busy Beaver Extreme May issue will have a tear-out pamphlet that you can mail in your tickets to the raffle, and then I'll put the website for everybody else in. So somebody's going to win a new truck. We're finally to that point.
Well, it's going to be bigger and better than ever, so I don't know if we have a goal, but I think we should easily blow away last year's sales.
Yeah,
with a new truck, a John Deere tractor, a pole building, and a long list of other prizes.
Over 75 items and over 75 items at $150,000, which one of them is a handcrafted deer shed antler chandelier built by Joe Johnson.
Yeah, in memory of his father.
Yep, you donated that in memory of your dad, and it's sitting. I will tell you, my wife has a golden doodle, and it's sitting in the floor beside my desk. Every time that dog goes down in my basement, she's down there sniffing on that deer. So, all right, folks. Well, we're ready for our first question. Whoever wants to break the ice and get this going, if you don't come, these kids are going to take your spot and be up all night. So, go ahead and make your way up to the microphone, and we'll field the first question of the night. So you gonna stand there? All right. Hold the microphone up there. You guys say what your name is, how old you are, and how much you love your older sister. Are you going to say that on camera?
My name is Roman, and I am from Ohio, and I love my sister 50%.
I bet your sister's up here, and she'll come back with a lower percentage for you now.
Well, I don't care. I got Nerf guns at home.
Oh, okay.
You got Nerf guns. You'll take care of that, won't you?
All right, well, what's your question, young man?
My question is, how do you get into the forest on crunchy leaves with making less noise?
I think that one's for you, Terry.
You
got one for him.
He's got a joke for me. He's got a real hunting question for you.
Well, there's a couple things you can do. You can some guys either take a leaf rake out there and they actually rake a path to their stand. I never went to that much trouble. I just took my time and go real slow, try to, instead of stomping, work your foot slowly into the leaves and go as slow as you can. So that's been my approach.
I just thought of an approach where you really stomp.
Yeah.
You remember that one?
The king buck.
Yep.
The king buck has got his own.
You got to stomp into the woods so the king buck knows that there's somebody bigger and badder than him and wants to come to you to fight.
Yeah,
that's
I've heard
theory.
that. I've heard that theory.
The other thing, too, that you're going to see when you walk the farm tomorrow is we don't go in the woods too often. So we hunt a lot of edges, so we don't go back into the timber too much. So
thank you, Roman. Good question.
Good question.
Osseo Gear introduces a premium line of bow hunting gear that is unmatched, pairing nature's finest camouflage with the best technological innovations. Osseo Gear brings whitetail bow hunters the gear they need to be the best at their craft. The unique camouflage mimics the intricate feather pattern of North America's greatest predatory creatures. Designed for invisibility, built for comfort, and engineered for function. Visit OsseoGear.com. That's ASIO Gear.com to start shopping. Osseo Gear. Prepare to be invisible.
Hi, I'm Jerry from Arthur, Illinois. I was wondering if you do big projects on your timber, like we're clearing 5 acres, do you spread that on a couple springs, or do you try to get that all done in 1 year and just be done with it, even if it runs down into your hunting season or close to that?
Well, typically I don't run it into the hunting season. I don't even run it into summer. I like to get those projects done about this time of the year, real early spring, real late winter. And I like to have the manpower or whatever equipment ready so that I'm in that sanctuary or on that property as few a days as possible. It's kind of like the shed approach, hunting shed antler approach. I want to go in one time. I don't want to go in multiple days looking for sheds. Do it once, get it over, get out of there, and stay out of there. There is projects that I've done that have went on for several days. I did a cut in my sanctuary in 2020 when the COVID thing hit. The country kind of shut down, and I still had a list of consulting clients, but a lot of them didn't want to meet after that. Kind of wanted to see what was going to happen with the world. So I was kind of stuck here at home with nothing to do, and I probably spent a week in my sanctuary with a chainsaw. But, that was far from running into the summer even. So try to get it done just as quick as you can. Get the manpower out there to get her done.
So in his case, he's got 5 acres. Is there a theory in doing the whole 5 acres one February and early March, or should you do? Is there certain scenarios where you only do half of that 5 acres and then wait till the following year to do the other half?
Well, it depends on the size of the property. I mean, I don't like going into and cutting an entire property at once. I like to stagger that cut so that the regrowth is at different stages. And even staggering it 1 year is not going to make that much difference. So what I like to do is do it like every 5 years. So go make a cut. 5 years later, make another cut. 5 years later, make another cut, and then they're always at various stages of regrowth.
So the bigger the block of timber, the more you space that out.
Right.
A small wood lot probably doesn't matter as much.
Yeah, for sure.
The he's going to show tomorrow in part of the program another section of woods. We don't walk down there, but before and after of when you went in there and cut that, you did all that I think in 1 year. But that's a really small little. Right,
that was a 5 acre woodlot, by the way. Yeah, we're going to show some photos of a 5 acre woodlot that I cut, and we was in there a few days, so you'll see that tomorrow.
All right, good question.
My name's Connor O'Brien. I'm with Quiet Cat and formerly with Performance Outdoors, where I spent 6 years in West Central Illinois testing these bikes while guiding and running business operations. These bikes have been a critical part of keeping our farms at Performance Outdoors preserved from the beginning of the year to the end. And the reasons for that is access. We were able to send a lot of hunting clients, guides, and others throughout our farms scouting, hunting, recovering deer with the most minimal impact possible. That means not as much foot traffic and not as much side-by-side traffic. These bikes have a lot of great options. What you can do to get yourself in and out of your farm is use these bikes on your brush hog trails and field edges by leaving less scent, causing less disruption, and being able to get in and out quicker. Another great option that we used out in Illinois was the drop-off method. By that, I mean we would have a client in the truck with the bike on the back, and I would actually drop them off 1,000 yards away from their farm and have them just finish the drive down the road and access their farm without me parking the truck near the deer. No slamming doors, no talking, no extra lights. They were able to access the farm really smoothly. Another great feature is that you can bring these bikes right to your tree stand. You can stash them at the base, lay them down in some brush, minimize all foot traffic in and around where the deer are going to be walking and doing their thing. Speed scouting was a critical part of being a guide. I had the opportunity to collect a lot of cameras and SD cards throughout the years in such minimal time and minimal impact on the farm. I could buzz these bikes around and hit all my points and be back at the lodge in less than an hour with a pocket full of SD cards for the clients and the guides to go over. Maintenance on these bikes is very simple. Keep the chain lubed, keep air in your tires, and charge up the battery. Before you go out on a hunt, it's pretty nice to make sure that you're going minimal sound on these bikes. So right here I see myself in gear 9. What I can do before my hunt is make sure that I'm in a gear where I won't have to shift while I'm riding and make extra noise. So maybe at the lodge before I start transporting it, I'll take this and just shift up and be in the gear I want to be. That way I have the opportunity to make the most minimal impact on the farm. This is the Ranger 1000 and this is the Apex 1000. This is the 26-inch medium large frame. This is the 24-inch tire small frame. Both bikes come in both sizes, and these are probably two of the best whitetail hunting bikes we offer. This is a hub drive model, which is more price friendly and can do a lot in the Midwest. This is a mid-drive model, which can basically cover all your bases from Midwest to Southeast to the Western Rockies. Thanks again for joining us, and I look forward to hearing from you if you have any questions.
All right, we got Big Sister here. You guys say your name and how old you are.
Hi, my name's Izzy, and I'm from Ohio. And by the way, Roman, it's 35%.
35%. Oh, he's adjusted his. This is like an auction.
We're going to have a brother-sister battle right here in the middle of the podcast. It looks to me like.
All right, so you got a question written down in your notebook there.
This one's for Dawn. What is the best way to keep your feet warm when you're hunting in the winter, but not in a 360 blind?
You know, I've got these things that are called boot blankets. Believe it or not, they used to sell them. I don't know if they still sell them or not, but they are these great big fluffy cloth things that you actually stick your boot inside them and then zip them up. It makes your feet look like clown feet. They're about this big, but definitely a lot of insulation around your toes, and you keep them warm that way.
That's a good question. You got another one while you're up here? You're going to wait a minute? I like those Thermacell insoles.
I've got them, but, I bought them, and then we had about 4 or 5 winters in a row that were mild, or I shot my bucks before the late season, so I never had a need to use them.
I was going to say you probably lost your charger in the remote control form. You still have them?
I think I still have them, but
that's both of those are good tools to use.
I'm Delmer from Indiana, and I just want to thank you guys for what you do. I've learned a lot from this podcast. But my question is, if there was one thing that you would tell a young hunter like me to do or not do to increase his success with mature bucks, what would it be?
One thing? Well, I'm going to have a hard time limiting to one. I can think of a couple right off the top of my head. First of all, human intrusion is a killer. Human intrusion ruins more properties than anything. A mature buck's number one desire is freedom of human intrusion. He don't ever want to be bothered by a person. He don't ever want to see one, smell one, be around one. So a lot of properties have been ruined with human intrusion. So that'd be one. The other one that's right there with that is the wind. You got a mature buck plays the wind. He uses his nose like we use our eyes. He sees with his nose. And you wouldn't think of going through the day with your eyes closed. He's not going to think of going through the day with ignoring the wind. It's how he stays alive. So you need to learn to play the wind, learn how mature bucks use the wind, and then keep that human intrusion to as minimum as possible. And I know that's 2. You want me to narrow it down to 1, but those are the 2 biggest ones. All right, thanks, Delmer.
Part of the content all of you are going to get tomorrow in his class, it was pretty earth-shattering to me when you can understand what a buck is thinking or wanting. That's different at 4. We talk about it's a different animal. Mm-hmm. Part of all of this information he's going to go over with you guys tomorrow at this master class is diving into when a buck gets mature, his wants and needs and desires change. And when you really look back at my shorter hunting career than yours and the journey I've been on, if I would have known that earlier in my career and understood why a buck is where he is when he's there, I would have been a whole lot further ahead on my journey than what I am now. But that's part of what's so special about this class is you sit in this room and he'll go over this, but then when you go out and actually see where these bucks walked, the visualization of where that tree stand is versus where he shot it starts to make sense. Why was that buck doing what he was doing at that particular weather pattern or wind direction? And that's the game changer for my career, and that's when you start killing bucks every year that are mature versus what you think is a shooter.
Well, I think what holds a lot of hunters back, deer hunters, is they've actually become too good at killing non-mature bucks, middle-aged bucks, say 3-4-year-old bucks, and they can't bring themselves to change tactics to take it to the next level because it's worked so well on these other deer, these middle-aged deer, that they just think it's a matter of time or luck or whatever before that same approach brings them success with older deer. And that's not the case. You got to approach it totally different because they're a different animal.
You combine that with, I have to shoot her, my neighbors will approach, and it basically never lets you raise the ceiling to get to that next level, and you basically become that neighbor.
Yeah, I talk about goals tomorrow in the class, and I think one of the reasons that I was able to take it to the level I have is because I would slowly raise the bar, and I refused to compromise my goals. And I'm telling you, I probably had more seasons where I did not shoot a deer than anybody in this room. But when I set a goal, I stuck to it, and oftentimes it forced me to change the way I did things. And over time, once you see it happen with a mature buck, each mature buck you kill is just a little bit easier than the one before. But if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. You got to recognize that something needs to change, and then you need to change it. Figure out what it is and change it.
Joe, you've known Don for a lot of years. How many years have you known him?
40.
So as you and Al Foster have basically watched him go through this journey, going where he talks about all this, he's as ate up as anybody I know with deer hunting. Was he that way 40 years ago too? It's just he was earlier in the journey?
He was. I mean, right off the bat, whenever, met him, he was wanting to learn.
Yeah.
And that's what made him, successful, because he was willing to change, he was willing to learn, and he just wanted to.
Yep. All right. Well, we got another question here.
All right. This question's for Don. My name's Eric. I'm from Nebraska. I actually have a couple questions, but you started talking about goals, and, Terry said that we have to put you on the spot, so I'm putting you on the spot. So I like the previous gentleman said, love the podcast. I have learned so much in the last, year and a half, 2 years listening to your podcast.
Thank you.
One of the things that really intrigued me, though, when you talked about goals, is that you said, I'm going to kill a Boone and Crockett deer on public land. I thought, here's a guy who is taking his knowledge and applying it to the everyday hunter. And then I noticed, through your podcasts here last fall, just didn't have a lot of luck in Iowa. You kind of said, well, I'm going to stick with my home farm. And now the last several weeks, again, you've kind of said, no, I really, that was a goal I set. So I want to know, are you going to do this or are you not going to do it? Because you've kind of wavered here the last several months. So that's my question, and I'll leave it to you.
Well, I guess that's that, huh? Actually,
I'll give you your $20 after we're done.
I appreciate that question because I like being challenged because that forces me to do whatever it takes to meet the challenge. But the situation in Iowa last year, it was my lack of success in Iowa last season was my own fault. The winter before, I was so involved with the consulting visits. I did 83 visits that year. And I think I was in 17 states, and I did not take the time I should have to find a property to hunt, to find a buck. I made a big mistake that I'll never make again if I draw an Iowa tag. I will never draw another Iowa tag until I know I've got a target buck. I didn't have a target buck. I had one property I had permission to hunt. I put in some effort to find a buck in the summer with trail cameras and such. But I really, messed up by not having a buck that I wanted to chase and a property where I knew I could kill that buck before I drew my tag. And that's a mistake I won't make if I ever draw another Iowa tag. And I am going to apply, get my bonus points. I don't know that I'll ever hunt there again because I'm not going to Iowa until I know I've got a giant to chase next time. As far as the public land buck, it's kind of ironic that you bring that up because that's a goal that's never left. And it just so happens that this may be the year it happens, just put it that way. I've actually got plans this week. I'm going to be on at least 2 different tracts of public land. I've got some information on a couple of really good bucks on public land. And Public is a crapshoot. You don't know what everybody else is doing. It's a little bit harder, but this could be the year. Put it that way.
But you're not going to go shoot a 165 buck. That's not. I mean, he's still looking for the world class buck. I mean, I think you would have had a target buck already if that was your only goal was to get a gross boon in the mid 160s. You could have gone after a buck this year for that.
Yeah,
but it just didn't. It wasn't quite what you wanted.
I'll put it this way. I know of 3 public land bucks, all in different areas, that would be well over 170 this year. Next year, hopefully they're even bigger. And I know of another public land buck that he'll be either be 5 or 6 years old this year. That he has everything going for him. He could be a real giant too. I think last year he was probably in the 160s, but he's got enough extra stuff going on his rack that he could be way up there too. So there's 4 potential bucks that, to my knowledge, are still alive today on different tracts of public land around the state of Illinois. Some of them are a distance from my house, so there's a couple of them that are a 3-hour drive. So it's not going to be like I just on a whim, have lunch and decide, hey, I'm going to go chase this deer this afternoon. That's not going to be a situation, but that's really the last deer hunting goal that I have. I mean, sure, I'd like to shoot more 200s, but I've shot 3, so that's really not a goal anymore. But I've never shot a giant I've shot bucks on public land before, but I've never shot a giant, and I'm talking at least 170 on public, and I am going to do it before I'm done, and if the good Lord gives me enough seasons.
Well, now that somebody's gone in and bought the farm next to some of our hunting properties because they found out where we were, you're going to have to rent a Prius to drive wherever you're going on public because people's going to be following you whenever you leave the house.
That's kind of a side story, isn't it, Terry? We found out this week that somebody bought a piece of ground right next to a lease we have just because we're there.
Yep.
And I think they're in for a rude awakening when they see the quality of bucks on that farm. So they spent a lot of money for a big heartbreak, didn't they?
Well, pretty much a lease where all we do is just test product. That's all it is, and they think that we're there hunting.
And let every Tom, Dick, and Harry that we know hunt there.
So anyway,
we're going to take that to the next level too.
The art of diversion in the real world. That could be be your next book.
Yeah.
Hunting out of a Prius and leasing up property to make your neighbors think you're hunting there.
Well, there's a reason that my new truck has not a personalized plate, not a single sticker on it.
No decals.
Yeah, and there's also a reason why I have a Quiet Cat bike. I can park miles away from where I'm hunting and jump on that bike, and nobody knows where I'm really at.
All right. Well, we got a new question here.
I'm Jake from Central Illinois. Oh. And another thing to go undercover, you had like a Biden flag or something on that Prius. I think would help.
Well, they know it wasn't me, that's for sure.
A rainbow flag and a Biden plate. Yeah. There you go.
Then your tree saddle.
Yeah. Oh, boy. That'd give me away, though. Yep.
I got a couple of questions here. One, a place that I hunt, actually about all the places I hunt, the only access is really through a field. And then I'm sitting on the edge, and then the deer come the other way. And I have a hard time, obviously getting in is easy, but leaving, I've heard you talk before in the podcast of have somebody out come pick you up or something. Mm-hmm. I'm by myself 20 minutes from my house. My wife's not coming. She lets me hunt, but she's not going to load 2 kids up and come up just to scare deer away.
She may be hoping you stay all night.
I know. She'll say she's on her way, and then 2 hours later show up or something. Well, so I guess would it be better to try to, I try to stay out as long as I can, but again, if it's a full moon, it doesn't really matter how dark it gets. It's still going to be light. Would I be better off to try to make a circle and go through the timber and come back up, or go through the field?
Well, I think that's going to depend on the stand and the whole situation, how it all lays out. I've bumped deer out of the field before. The other thing, and we just talked about this in the last class, I don't think deer see as well as you think they do in the dark, And the reason I say that is because I walk in without a flashlight and out without a flashlight all the time, never use a flashlight. And in wide open fields in the dark, you know, where you can see the horizon and you can see deer silhouettes, I've walked within 20 yards of deer in wide open fields in the dark, and I don't know if they can't see me, but they can hear me for sure, walking in corn stalks or whatever. I don't know if they can't see me or they just feel safe because it's dark and think I can't see them or what. But, you know, I don't want to climb down if there's deer like right close to my stand. I'll let those deer feed away. But once they get 100 yards away or so, if I think I can get on the ground, I don't want them to catch me climbing out of that tree for anything. And the farther I can get away from that tree before they catch me, the better. But if they feed, you know, 100 yards away, I would just climb down and slip out the best that you can.
Okay.
There's a key point to this, though. He's hunting each stand like 2 times a year.
Yeah.
Okay, so if this is a stand where you're hunting 20 times a year and it's 20 times that you're bumping those deer, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about doing this
a couple times,
once, maybe twice a year.
So when you bump, you know, like obviously deer are different than your mature bucks. If a mature buck would see you, would that be more concerning? You know, I seen him go out to the field. He wasn't in range. He's 100 yards out. It's past shooting light. Is it going to mess me up to bump him out? Is he going to remember that?
Well, it's definitely going to affect that buck more than it would another deer, a lesser deer. They're masters of survival. They're going to remember every encounter they had with a human in the woods. Yep. And even I think they'll even remember every encounter they had with human scent in the woods. And that's where I just talked about, you know, a mature buck is different than a middle-aged buck. A 3 or 4 year old buck, yeah, he may smell where you walked in and stand there and sniff the ground for a little bit and go about his business. When you start talking about 5, 6, 7 year old deer, you don't get very many chances to screw up. You get about one.
Yeah.
And if he busts you, it's pretty much over from that location. So I get what you're saying. It's just it's reality. You know, what else are you going to do? Are you going to stay there all night? You got to come down. It's just how you're going to do it and create the least amount of disturbance. And it depends on each stand location. You know, are you close to a creek where you can slip down and walk out the creek, or
that's another place that the Quiet Cat would come in handy, because if you can get down and go the opposite direction, you can ride in this big open ag field. You could ride 1.5 miles and go out and circle them around on that bike. You can't do that on foot.
Yeah.
I've actually had deer watch me ride that Quiet Cat bike, and they're out in the field feeding, not real close, say within 80 or 100 yards, and I ride by, and instead of running, they look at me like, what in the heck is that thing? It's like they can't believe it. It's almost like they're scratching their heads trying to figure out what it is.
Me and my father-in-law both want a tunnel to our stand, so you just go up and down. And
I've thought about that.
I know a guy that's got one. I've got a consulting client in Ohio that's probably listening to this that does have a tunnel in a hillside up into a blind. He is never exposed. 36-inch tile, buried in a hillside, ladder it makes a 90-degree turn up. Ladder right there.
Till you meet a critter nose to nose in the middle of that thing in the middle of the night.
That's our only fear.
Get a raccoon in there, and it's only one way out, and you're both trying to find it.
Last question would be wind, especially like middle to end of October. It's kind of a lull anyways. But if it's, I mean, do you even go out if there's no wind? I mean, there's times I've been out, I just feel like it's swirling, and I feel like I'm hurting myself more than I'm helping.
Yeah, I will go out, but I'm not going to go to a good stand, if you will. I may go to an observation stand or something like that, where it's the kind of stands that I shoot does from, for example. I'm not shooting a doe from my best stands. I've got like the A-level stands, and I got the B stands. And the B stands, I'll take chances there that I never will with the A-level stands.
You'll see some of them tomorrow. Makes sense. Okay.
Thanks so much for having us. Wes Whitten from Lincoln, Nebraska. So when you talk about lack of human intrusion, obviously the sky's the limit as far as that goes. The bigger the better, the less you're in there the better. But can you give us some kind of parameters to work with as far as, if you have a smaller property or you have other goals with the property? I mean, a lot of us have kids and things as far as being able to interact with the property and have, certain areas, what's kind of the timeline that you look at as far as not disturbing the deer versus, how much is too much?
Well, first of all, I encourage you to keep your priorities in order. If you got kids, I promise you those kids aren't going to be home long. You're going to wake up one day and they're out of the house and gone. So don't put your deer hunting above those kids for anything. To answer your question, though, once things green up in the spring, I am not on my property from that point on. How much human intrusion? Well, the smaller the property, the more important lack of human intrusion is, because there's so little room for error on a small property. Just one time may bump the buck off. And I've said it many times that if you want to kill big deer consistently, you have to hunt them where they bed, where they spend their daylight hours. If that buck is bedded on your neighbor instead of you, just across the fence, your odds of killing that deer are 10% what they are if he's on the same property you're hunting. So, it becomes real critical. The smaller the property, the more critical it becomes. There's really no general rule or anything like that. Other activities, a lot of it depends on the property too. We've all heard of that dreaded doe factory, where there's nothing but does in the summer. This place, I mean, in some people's world, this property would be considered a doe factory. I don't have bucks here in the summer. I've got does raising their fawns here, and the bucks all leave and they go out in bachelor groups off of the property and spend the summer. And then when those bachelor groups break up in the fall, those bucks start coming back home. And so the question I get posed is, if the bucks aren't there in the summer, what's it matter? Well, I don't want the does to be nervous either. The bucks show up and they kind of read the body language of the does, and if they're not moving about relaxed, then the bucks are going to be on edge too. So I guess that's just a long-winded way of saying there's really no hard and fast rule when it comes to human intrusion. The less, the better.
You're back again. Yeah, you can talk. Hold that thing up to your mouth.
What is your favorite way to prepare deer meat?
My favorite way to prepare deer meat, there's absolutely no doubt about this question. I like to take my deer and I like to drive down to B&M Custom Venison, and I like to tell Brian and Maria to make deer bacon out of it, because there is nothing like their deer bacon with jalapenos.
And that
you need to try some of that. And in fact, if you remind me before you leave, I'll give you a package.
That question was not staged because they're here tonight either. That was a complete random question. His little snack sticks are really good too. All right, here you go.
Terry, it looks like you have a lot of tasty turkey on your land. I have not killed my first turkey yet. Do you need any help removing some?
As soon as Joe Johnson over here kills his on there, you can be number 2, but I've already promised he's the first one that gets to whack a turkey on my place. Are y'all coming to hunt this year?
Possibly.
Okay. If as soon as Joe gets his done, your dad can bring you down and whack one. Or 26 of them, whichever way's best.
Ryan from St. Louis. I got a couple questions here. So my uncle has a oak flat, white oak, right, and there's no trees have been harvested out of it. But the areas where there is sunlight hitting through, we can see that there's just oak saplings growing, right, and they only get about 6 foot high. It's not doing much for the deer. So one of my questions is, he's getting ready to have it cut. What are some plants or shrubs that you like to plant, or you would go to? What's your go-to? And he's got ridges some of them face south, some of them face north and west. What's your go-to for cover and browse?
Well, when it comes, I'm going to get off a side tangent here just a little bit.
That's okay.
If there's any loggers in here, they're going to be offended, but I just got to tell it like it is. One thing that I see with people harvesting timber on their property is these loggers want to come in and high grade the timber. In other words, they want to cherry pick the prime trees. They want the white oaks, the walnuts, and things like that are the most valuable. It's basically they make more money for the time invested with those species.
Per tree that they're dragging out. That's really what it comes down to.
So if you're going to have your timber cut, make sure it's not and they like to use the term select cut or light harvest. Well, don't fall for some of that garbage, because what they're trying to do is come in and cherry pick your timber. You tell them to come in, and every tree, every species, that there's market for that softwood, the cottonwoods, the sycamores, the soft maples. There's market for that. It's just not as high as some of that other stuff, so they don't want to spend their time doing it. But if you take nothing but the oaks and the walnuts, what are you left with? You're left with a bunch of lesser quality trees producing seed to regenerate your land. Make them come in and cut everything. Don't take any excuses. There's people that'll do it right. If you can't find one, just keep moving right on down the list till you do. The second thing is, when you harvest a timber, you don't need to go in there and plant other trees. All you need to do is get the sunlight on the ground. The seed from the trees that are there, you're talking about a white oak flat. Well, there's white oak seed all over the place there. Believe it or not, the deer and squirrels didn't eat every tree. Mother Nature's got a perfect way of regenerating a forest. And once that sunlight comes in, whether a tornado comes through or a forest fire or whatever, that seed is laying there. And all it needs is sunlight, and it'll regenerate. So you're not going to have to go in there and plant a single thing. All you need to do is get as much sunlight on the ground as you can.
And then just let whatever grows grow?
Exactly, yep.
Get that canopy out of there.
Gotcha. So then my second question, so there's three of us, that hunt my uncle's farm every now and then, and obviously it's an oak flat. It's pretty open, right? So it's hard to get in and out without being spotted. How many hunts would you say, before we're tipping the scales towards overhunting a property like that?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say. A lot of it depends on, time of year. If there's no leaves on the trees, obviously it's going to be tougher to get in and out without deer seeing you. Early season, you're probably going to get away with a little more.
Sure.
But each situation's unique. There's just no hard and fast rules a lot of times when it comes to deer hunting. You just got to kind of feel your way through it and use past experience. But it's better to err on the side of caution than it is to push the envelope and run those deer off.
Can I use an example here?
Sure.
So let's say you got this ridge top that's all oak, and you got thick cover on each side, but then there's big open woods. When I was early in my hunting career, I would say, I have to hunt that mash crop as a food source, especially in the evenings, because the deer come out. What I've adapted to is when I find a situation like that I can't get in and out without blowing every deer, I don't hunt the acorns while they're eating it. I'll go to the edge of where the cover is, and that transition between open woods and that cover with the right wind blowing out, that's where that buck's going to be gritting in the rut on the downwind side of the bedding area. So early in my career, when I was killing 125-inch 3-year-olds in Kentucky, I was setting on the food source in early season hoping I would get a crack at it. As I've gotten older, I'll save that spot for the rut and not worry about the mash crop as much. And that transition between big open woods and your bedding cover, that's an awesome spot to set all day on the magic time in November, because that transitions where that buck could be cruising on the downwind side of the bedding area. You'll see a couple examples of that tomorrow. So over the years, I've changed a lot. I don't go into those big oak flats at all. I'm only hunting them a couple of times a year when the wind's right. You showed me that the very first time he showed me that, it was completely foreign to anything I'd ever done when I thought, hey, I'm a pretty good deer hunter. And then it's like a light bulb goes off.
Gotcha. Final question here is, so on a separate family farm, 150 acres. I've got family, though, that on 50 of it, they're consistently harvesting wood for firewood. So chainsaws, log splitter, tractor. Is that activity that would push deer, like mature bucks, off that entire 150 and they would stay on the neighbors, or is that activity more like farming that they might get used to?
Well, a deer doesn't recognize property lines, so that disturbance is going to keep him away, in a certain distance. I would say, again, I'd have to see the layout, but more than likely it's not going to run them off the entire 150 if they're not on the entire 150.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
I want to go back just a little bit on the whole deal with the loggers, and I don't want people to think that all loggers are there just to rape their timber and take advantage of them. The reason I kind of went on that spiel is I've seen two different situations on consulting visits this winter where the landowner said, we had a select cut done. The logger came in and he did a select cut. And what I seen was not a select cut because, throughout a woods there will be different tree species. And what I seen was the logger came in and in the white oak areas and in the walnut areas, they cut trees. And then you get into maybe some creek bottoms or whatever where there's giant, and I'm not talking big hollow trees. I'm talking good timber that's maybe 30-inch trunks of maple, soft maple, silver maple, sycamores, cottonwoods that could have been harvested. If they're doing a select harvest or a light cut, why did they totally leave an area untouched? They left it untouched because of the species that were there. And they're not doing you any favors when that happens. There are a lot of reputable loggers. It's just you need to be careful, and you also need to be very clear when you're having your timber harvested what you expect from them.
You've talked about stewardship a lot, and this property that we're going to walk tomorrow is going to be your grandkids one day, and your goal is to have them in this property better for when they take it over than when you left it. And going in and just taking a couple species and leaving that canopy with junk trees isn't going to promote the timber value generations from now, because those same 6-foot saplings are going to just die off and nothing's ever going to grow, and you're going to be left with big scrap trees there for many, many years. So stewardship is very important to everything that you do, not only here, but also talking to your clients, because most of these properties, if we're investing in them, they're going to be your kids' property one day.
And I just hate seeing people taken advantage of. I hate seeing habitat destroyed. And the harvesting timber is not destroying habitat. It's a great thing. It's fantastic. It's a crop. It's no different than harvesting corn, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it.
Okay.
All right, Eric here again. Not quite as controversial questions. Actually, I have two other questions.
Okay.
The first is, and I don't think I've heard you discuss this on any podcast before, what is in general or average time you like to be in your tree stand? Like when you talked about the Joey hunt, you said it was raining, you were in your truck, you got out to that stand, quote unquote, late. Well, like, what is a good time for you? 30 minutes for sunrise, or before, shooting time, an hour? What do you typically do?
Oh, I like to be there about 20 to 30 minutes before shooting light. Yeah.
On an edge.
Yeah, and I'm on an edge. I'm not stomping through the timber.
Okay, very good. Mm-hmm. And then my second question is, and this is as I'm developing my property, like, how do you keep track of all the things you do? Do you use an Excel spreadsheet? Do you have a notebook? I mean, I just, because I have a property, and like things we've done over the property the last 6 years, like, I know I did it, but I'm like, okay, when did I do it? So I've started to keep track. But like, do you have any good tips or good programs? And I'm not talking about Buckview. I'm talking about, like, we cut trees here, we planted this, we did this. Like, how do you keep all that stuff straight?
Well, I don't really have a program. Basically, it's continual observation of what's going on the property. And when I see something that needs to be done, it goes on my list, my to-do list. It doesn't really matter to me that I planted these trees in 1990. It matters to me when I look at them and they're starting to canopy and I need to get some sunlight on the ground. And I don't think you can really schedule that. I don't know if that answers your question, but I really don't have a program or a spreadsheet or anything like that. It's just it's an annual observation. So one thing I do, and I mentioned this before too, is so when I'm sitting in my tree stand hunting, while I'm sitting there and I'm thinking and I'm looking around, I'm thinking, what can I do to make this stand better than it is right now? And I think all my stands are good stands. If I didn't think I could kill a buck there, I wouldn't have put it there. But I'm always thinking, what can I do to make it better? And I'll sit there and I'll just turn my head from side to side. What can I do? And sometimes it might be something as simple as taking a chainsaw and cutting a tree across a trail that's just a little bit farther than I like to shoot to kind of push them deer up closer to me. Or maybe I'm thinking, you know what, maybe I need a shooting lane over here because I expect to shoot the deer here, but that doesn't mean there's no chance he'll be here, so I need to cut a shit. And I take notes on my phone. I'll pull my phone out, and I'll type in the stand location. Then underneath that, I'll say I need to do this, this, and this. So then come spring, this time of the year, I'll go back to those stand locations. I'll look at my phone, the notes on my phone, and I'll say, I need to take a chainsaw. I need to bring this, this, and this. So I've got all the tools I need for those projects that I've outlined, and it's just continual. It never stops. I may make a list at a stand site this last season, and next season I'm making a different list from that same stand. I've done this for years before cell phones. I would take a little paper pad and an ink pen, and I'd put it in a Ziploc baggie and had it in my pack. And on each sheet, at the top of the sheet, I'd write the stand, a name for that stand, so I knew which stand I was talking about. Then I'd make my list. And in the spring, when I would get ready to go to that stand to make it better, I would just rip out that sheet of paper and I'd look and, okay, here's what I need to take with me to get all this done. And, when I got through my list, I was done for the spring. The thing I found, though, is that anymore, I've given so much of my time to other people's properties that, things green up in the spring and I still got a list that didn't get done. So I'm going to have to slow down here or it's going to start affecting my success at some point. So
I haven't even been on my farm since hunting season. I haven't stepped foot on it. I haven't had time. So the other thing, though, that's funny about him is we all have kind of our specialty. We've learned a trade or we've gone to college or whatever we've done with our lives. Most of us have that one thing that they're really good at or trained at. It might be a fireman. It might be, a cop knows the laws or whatever. This guy's dedicated his life to deer hunting and managing this property. He's like this steel trap. I've been in the truck with him, and somebody that he did consulting for 5 years ago will call, and they start talking about the property, and he remembers a specific tree or a ditch or something on a property that he walked. I have another buddy of mine that remembers every hole he's ever played in a golf course. I mean, it's just it's what people have given their lives to. We were walking the property, I think, last Saturday, and somebody asked about some pine trees that we walked by, and I planted them in 2003. I mean, he just that quick. I mean, I don't remember what I had for dinner 2 nights ago, and he remembers what year he planted a tree. So he's like a steel trap when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I don't know how you remember that kind of stuff. But
I've got a client in Southern Illinois that's a orthodontist, and I told him, I said, I remember every property I've been on, believe it or not. It may take me a second to jog my memory, but once I got it in my head, I remember that property. And he says, well, I can relate to that. He says, I totally believe that, because he says, I can't remember my patient's name, but I remember every set of teeth I ever seen. So,
well, hey, everyone, this is Terry Peer from the Chasing Giants podcast. This is episode 109, and I have Mark Kennedy from biofarm.com on the line tonight to talk to us about a property in Alexandria County, Illinois. Mark, tell us a little bit about it. It's a big piece of property.
Yes, sir. It's an interesting property. It's something that you and I couldn't take a stroll around in a short period of time. It'd probably take a couple of days to cover it all. but it has good access from 2 different county roads, which feed off of State Route 127. So it's easy to get to. And the feature that I like the most is that 2.25 miles of its border are up against the Shawnee National Forest. And the accesses to the National Forest land are pretty limited. So I don't think you'd have very many people approaching.
So we basically don't have neighbors to 2 sides of the property or over 2 miles of the property line. But even though it's national forest, to get to it would just be a huge undertaking. So the likelihood of many people pressuring you from the backside is huge. But I do like the fact that you mentioned that it has 2 different access points from 2 different county roads, which that's just pivotal to access for different areas of bedding that you might create or even different wind directions.
Yes. There are also 4 food plots that have been developed on it. And if you're wanting to know about the pressure of how many people are hunting it, for the last 4 years, there's only been one man, and I think at one part 2 years ago, there were 2 men that were hunting the property.
All right, so not a lot of pressure for sure. 487 acres. This would be a good property for a group to go in together to buy it as a hunting property. And my guess is, with the interest rates still down, it'd be cheaper per acre than probably even some of the lease prices that we have today. So big enough in acreage, a lot of topography, a lot of big mature timber, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, Terry. If somebody wanted to have a timber harvest, there is part of the property that is one of the harder to access areas that I don't think anything's been cut off of it in about 40 years.
Yeah, so their timber value, number one, to get some of your initial investment back, but also using it strategically as habitat for cleaning out some of that big canopy and creating bedding cover. So pretty much able to start with a clean slate and hunt quite a few people. So aside from going to buyafarm.com and searching properties in Alexander County, how can people who are interested in this learn more?
I'm generally easy to catch by phone at 618-924-1747 or on my email at markkennedy@buyafarm.com.
Well, thanks for having us, and please accept our genuine appreciation for supporting the podcast. You guys were the ones that helped us get started with this, and that relationship is really important to us. So thank you to you and your partners for supporting the podcast. And if you're not following Buy a Farm on social media or visiting their website for all of your not only land purchase needs, but also you guys do auctions and many other services for people who are looking to sell. So reach out to Mark and the other agents at Buy a Farm and give them a follow on social media. Mark, thanks for your time talking about this property. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you, and it's our pleasure to work with you. And anything you ever need, just give us a call.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Terry.
This is for all 3 of you, what kind of prayer do you guys like to say when you're harvesting a deer?
What kind of prayer do we say?
You want to start with that one, Joe?
I always just thank the good Lord for the opportunity, health, and a beautiful day.
Yeah, I thank him for the experience that, he put the passion in my heart to chase big deer and then allowed me to have my dreams come true. I thank him that I was born in a country where I could have a dream so crazy as making a living deer hunting, and I'm able to do it. And, it's a blessing that I can't even really hardly describe, because if I would have been born in any other country, I probably couldn't do what I'm doing today. And that's why I get on my political rants, if you will, because I feel sorry for kids your age. I see this country falling apart at the seams, and I don't think that your generation is going to have the opportunities that I have. So, I pray for our country all the time, and I pray for your generation, because it's really going to be difficult for, kids your age to be able to chase their dreams the way folks my age were able to. And I'm just hoping that we can salvage that, and it's not too late. But that's one of the things that I'm forever ever thankful for, is where I was born. I was born in the greatest country that this planet's ever known, and it just breaks my heart to see what's happening to it. But God's got a plan. I've gotten a little bit better here in the last couple of years of believing in His plan. But some days I revert back to my younger years, and when I was a little bit rowdier, and I'm ready to go do battle in those days. So once in a while, you guys probably listen to the podcast and know when I'm having one of those days.
Or when Terry fires you up.
Yeah, I think Terry does it on purpose once in a while too.
I will admit I haven't always been the best at what I prayed for. And in my youth, I probably prayed for the wrong things when I was hunting. I don't think it's right. I've grown, so I don't pray for an opportunity for something to happen, but I pray for, and I give thanks for the opportunity that's there. So it might be a day that you don't see anything. It might be a day that it's just you sit in a tree and not see a deer and reflect and think. But the thing I'm most thankful for is that whether or not I shoot a deer or not, that God put people in my life that have encouraged me to do the things that I love. And one of those is my grandfather, Lester, that the foundation's named after. He was the first one that ever took me hunting. So it's an opportunity for me to thank God for having a grandfather that took the time for you. You talked about the time you spend with your dad. It's the same thing. You got to thank God for the opportunity for people to be in your life that encourage you to do what you want.
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
She got another one.
So most of the time we'll kill does for meat. Is it better to kill does before or after the rut?
Well, I prefer to kill them late season. Even though in the late season, a lot of times the does that are on your farm, if you're providing a good food source, a lot of times those are not maybe does that are local or home body does. Maybe they came from the neighbors. Maybe they came a mile away because you're the only person in the neighborhood that's got food. But still, I think when you shoot the does early in the year, I think you're putting way too much pressure on your property, retrieving those does and whatever. And that's counterproductive to shooting a good buck. So I like to wait till the rut's over in the late season to shoot does.
What is the best tree to hunt out of?
A wooden one.
I mean, what kind?
The tree species is not super important. It's one that you can stay hid in. I like oak species that hold their leaves in the winter. Pin oaks, shingle oaks are a couple. If they've still got those brown leaves on their branches in the wintertime, it's a whole lot easier to stay hid up there. So that's the kind of tree I like the best.
Wait till you see a tree stand we're going to visit tomorrow on the second farm. You're going to laugh at that. Out of all these big 360 blinds he has, and Novix is a tree stand sponsor, wait till he sees the hedge tree that he shot a buck out of. You'll laugh when you see it, I promise. You will. All right.
So your logging deal got me thinking a little bit.
Are you a logger?
I've done a lot of logging.
Oh, my.
But I agree with you 100% what you said, because I'm on a lot of properties where people have taken the walnut and the white oak and these nice big oaks and cottonwoods that are not so quality are too big to even hardly saw up anymore.
Uh-huh.
So I know exactly what you're talking there.
Well, thank you.
So My question is, I have a farm where I rent the ground out to a young farmer like me just starting up, and he has a day job, and he's doing a lot of the farming in the evening when the deer want to come out and feed. Is that going to affect it during hunting season when I'm out there trying to hunt or not?
No, I don't think so. That equipment, those deer know a threat versus just normal human activity. So, I've been on my tractor before, and I've drove from here to that chair literally from bedded deer that did not get up. They just laid there as I drove by, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And I'm talking not mature bucks, but like 3-year-old bucks, that close. So they know what's going on. They know that's not a threat. So I don't think that's going to hurt you whatsoever.
Yeah, well, he talks about a story tomorrow where your objective was not surprising the deer. You're giving that deer plenty of time to make a decision. Does he want to slip away or does he want to stay where he's at? But it's when you are surprised and he's surprised, that's the worst possible scenario.
I'm Rich. I'm from Ohio. I'm going to say southeastern Ohio because, as you well know, that's a different planet from the rest of Ohio. Mm-hmm. We've got hills, and it looks like West Virginia.
We got Chicago, so Illinois has got
I'd rather take
diversity too.
Kentucky's got Louisville. We don't claim it either.
That's true. Yeah, I've got 3 questions, but I'm going to break them up. A couple are a little more in depth, and I'm going to try and get Dwayne involved here, maybe a little bit, since he's hanging out in the back taking a vacation. The first one's related to what I just talked about. Hunting and scouting when it comes to nothing but hills and valleys and lows and highs and swirling wind and everything else. How do you go about approaching a new property that's set up like where I live, trying to minimize your intrusion, but the wind is unpredictable 100% of the time? And how do mature deer use land and terrain like that when they're navigating it?
Well, if you would look out, outside here where we are here in central Illinois, you see all these big ag fields, huge ag fields, and you know that the deer activity there is going to be very, very limited. You're not going to go out in the middle of one of these harvested fields and put up a blind or something. It's just an area that's really dead for human or deer traffic. Within those heavily wooded regions, there's also those pockets where there's virtually no deer activity. They're a whole lot harder to see. Here it's real easy. You got the big open field. There's not much deer activity except around the edge. What you got to do is find those pockets in those areas where there is the most deer activity, separate those from the areas where there's very little. The other thing is a mature buck is always going to want to get away from pressure, human pressure. So the one thing that I look for when I'm looking for places to hunt is I want freedom of other hunters. I would rather have 1 acre cover to myself than to share 100 acres with just one other deer hunter, because I just take it for granted that one other deer hunter is going to put so much pressure on his property or on the property that it's going to run it for everybody. You're going to see some places when we go on this tour tomorrow that I'm guessing most of you would never have even thought to hunt there. And yet I killed some giants on these places. And we're actually going to see 4 different properties. We're going to walk 2 of them, and we're going to see a couple more just from the road. We're going to stop and get out and talk about them from the road. But they are places that most of you would probably not even consider hunting. You got to get away from the other hunters, number one, because that's what a mature buck's going to do.
There's just very few people at the point in our hunting career that we even trust to be on the same property with us. I mean,
no doubt about
it. It's the honest truth. Everybody wants to kill a big buck, but there's very few people that are willing to really sit back and be disciplined enough to do what we're doing.
And I bring that up because it's easier for newer hunters, even myself. You walk in the woods where I'm at, and we're dealing with 20 to 30 acre parcels as opposed to a couple hundred out here. And you can change elevation by 500 feet within a matter of 100 yards. And there's patches of bedding everywhere. There's no rhyme or reason or pattern to it. So it's easy to get overwhelmed when you walk in, and that's why I think a lot of guys, especially in my area, will resort to hunting where the sign's at, because there's, it's difficult to understand how they use that terrain and navigate it.
Well, in that rough country, you got to hunt high. You can't get down the bottoms. The wind will give you away every time. So the more elevation change you've got, the higher you need to get. You need to stay up on those ridges.
And I think the people, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but hunting public's different. I'm not talking about hunting public, but hunting the hill country, I still think that you can go in there and do the exact same types of projects that you're talking about in open ag field in Illinois, with opening up the canopy and taking pockets strategically in the right areas of hill country and creating that bedding in the right spot that allows you to get in and out and hunt those downwind sides. So I agree with you. I mean, we have a whole lot more topography in Kentucky than we have here, but then you're even more than me. But just to say it's all big woods and it's all a bunch of hills, I can't do anything on small tracts of land, I disagree with that. I think you can go into that hill country and in the right places say, I'm going to zone off this 1.5 acres inside of big timber and completely trash it and make it bedding. But it's in a pivotal spot of that farm where I can access it and hunt maybe 2 to 3 different wind directions on the downwind side. I think you can still do those same projects that we talk about here. When you guys walk this property tomorrow, there's not one person that can leave this property and say, I'm going to make my farm Don Higgins' home farm. It doesn't exist. Yeah. To duplicate this would take the right property in 30 years because it took him the right property in 30 years. But every single one of these projects could be done strategically on any type of property to make your property better. And that's why going and actually seeing it in person, you can pick up all these little nuggets that can be game changers for you wherever you're from.
And not to give everything away, but Steve Shields, our video guy, has been following me around all winter. And, we haven't put it much on YouTube in quite a while, as far as new videos, but I can tell you,
there's a bunch
before 2022 is over, you're going to see a bunch of new content, video content, and
no whiteboards though.
No whiteboards, no, we don't need that. And I'm going to try not to stick my foot in my mouth too much, but we got some things coming, and one of those is going to be a video on what you can do in a situation like you're describing.
Yeah, that hunting the wind video you guys produced, I think, was really helpful to a lot of people.
Well, thank you.
Second one, which might get Dwayne involved a little bit, but I think any of you could answer, and I think a lot of listeners are going to appreciate this question, is you got a lot of guys out there that are passionate about land management, but they don't have the money to use the type of equipment that we're using. That also limits them on what type of food sources they can plant. So if you were going to recommend a couple of different products for low-budget hunters that want to put in their own food sources, what would you go for? There's a lot of variables there, but generally.
Well, probably I'll throw one out, then I'll let Dwayne take it from there if he wants to come up and take this mic. But I think oats is the easiest crop that we sell to grow. If you're hunting a property where there's an ag field, even though the farmer is not going to allow you to buy crop back or anything like that, you can still go out there and broadcast oats into standing soybeans or even corn and get a good oat crop. I mean, oats will grow in the road if they get some water on them. That's a really easy one, and I don't know, Dwayne can probably throw out another idea or two as well. So.
The man, the myth, the legend, Dwayne Hopkins.
Well, I agree with Don and with the oats. I think the winter green, I call them winter greens. So you're going to pick up the brassicas. In my world, it's the plot topper type product. Does it a little help from Mother Nature? A shower, it'll grow. We can get it on top of the ground, in standing crop or afterwards, and it'll grow on into the winter as well. So when everything else is turning brown, we're bringing something in turning green, and it continues to grow. It's a cold weather crop, so that low budget, high return in my mind.
I think another one that you don't have to have a lot of big equipment on would be clover. You might have to take a rototiller and small plot. If you're using the right blend of clover, it'll hold up to browse pressure. And you can trim the top of it off with a weed eater. So I think most guys might use it a little bit more of an excuse than the work they could possibly put in and have something. But who doesn't have somebody they know that has a rototiller that you could borrow for a couple hours one day, and a backpack or a pump sprayer, and then a weed eater? Pretty simple solutions for different applications.
And the last question is not really for me, but I know you guys are in a lot of internet forums and see questions like this, and probably pretty helpful. You guys talk about intrusion. No, I'm not.
I'm not in internet forums. I stay out of those Facebook groups.
A lot of guys freak out about where to field dress their deer if they end up taking a doe or something like that, or they need to relocate the carcass and field dress it there, or do it on the spot. So any input on that?
Well, I'm not sure how much difference it makes, but I haul mine. Well, depending on where I'm at, if I'm here on my property, I haul the deer out and do it back near a water hydrant just to clean things up as much as anything, So you got a water hose there to wash the carcass out and wash the deer off, and I'd just rather do that than have a bloody mess back in the field and have to come home.
He has
that
the
way.
bloody mess in his driveway.
Yeah. My wife loves that too.
Yeah. But you also have to realize too that due to our obligations and who we are and the content we have to create, there's usually a photographer and a photo session involved, and there's a lot more extra steps that, good, bad, and indifferent, we take. We carry taxidermist eyes in our bags with us to put in when we're taking the photos to make the photos look better. Cleaning the deer off. You've heard this guy go on rants before about people not cleaning deer off and being a bloody mess in the back of a pickup truck. We want to be extremely respectful, and the best way to do that is take your pictures before you gut it and trying to hide the mess. And so that's probably the biggest reason we haul them out is the other stuff that we have to do. Okay.
What kind of knife do you guys usually prefer to field dress your deer if you field dress your own deer?
Well, I field dress my own deer because I don't have anybody to do it for me. So what kind of knife? Sharp one. About as good as I can tell you. I just, I've got a skinning knife that my daughter gave me about probably close to 20 years ago, and became my favorite knife. So I don't even know the brand or the style or what I would call it, but
the most dangerous knife is a dull knife. That's what my grandfather told me.
Mm-hmm.
Which crossbow do you prefer, a compound pond or a crossbow?
Yeah, would do you prefer, a compound or a crossbow there, Don?
Well, I prefer a compound. I'll leave it at that. Oh.
All right.
Chad Belter from Central Wisconsin. I guess I have a question. You've got other people that come on your property sometimes to take out, you call like a coal buck. Mm-hmm. How do you come out with, like, what's your carrying capacity, or how do you decide how many you want to shoot, or where's your cutoff, I guess?
He's previewing the secret sauce of tomorrow,
he's
but you
can get into tomorrow's material.
You can touch a little bit on it here.
Yeah,
but we don't tomorrow.
I don't have like a hard and fast rule. The carrying capacity here we've never come close to reaching it, because you see all the ag crops that surround this property. I can get away with planting a half acre of soybeans here, and those soybeans will all mature because the deer just, as those soybeans are growing, there's so many other soybean fields at that same stage of growth that the deer have so many options. Carrying capacity has never been an issue. It's more about, selecting which bucks to take out at which age class. And we're going to get into that in detail tomorrow. For me to answer that question is going to give away the secret sauce, and it's also going to require about 15 minutes of explanation, if you will. So
I think if somebody looks you or you see content on the internet that says the answer to that question, you should take it the same way somebody tells you what fertilizer to put on your food plot without a soil test. You have to analyze your property, the herd at that age class, and then make the decision. Your decision might change year to year based on the age class that you see coming up. And these guys, that's what gets him so fired up, is these guys come out and say, this is the answer for everybody and everybody's property. It's no different than somebody calling Dwayne Hopkins over at the office and saying, hey, I want to plant soybeans. What fertilizer should I put on it? I mean, but good question. But you'll enjoy that segment of the class tomorrow, I think. All right.
Jason from Michigan. So earlier you said that a big buck probably remembers every human encounter, and then you said that he probably remembers every time he scented a human too.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're talking earlier in podcast that you should hunt your edges, leave the heart of the property for the deer. So are you worried about when your wind's blowing into a standing cornfield or the neighbor's woods, if that buck is over there smelling you, picking up, where you're sitting at in your tree stand?
Mm-hmm. I do, but I hunt with a specific purpose. So when I go sit in my stand, I'm not just looking at a deer trail thinking, well, there's a deer trail, the deer's going to come by me, and I'm 20 yards away. I'm thinking, okay, it's an afternoon hunt. The buck is in his bedding area as I go into my stand. I know the bedding area is right there. And I know that more than likely the food source that he's going to want to go to, or the scrape that he's going to want to go to, or when he gets up from his bed that afternoon, he is most likely to come this direction. I know that the wind is good for him to come that direction. And it's, every detail is analyzed and taken into consideration for every hunt. And I'll probably say it again tomorrow and repeat myself, but I've been hunting for 45 years. In the top 5 bucks I've killed in those 45 years, 4 of those were killed in the last 4 seasons. Yet today I hunt less than I've ever hunted in my life as far as time in a tree. And what it boils down to is I prepare more now than I've ever prepared before in my life. I spend more time getting ready to hunt, setting up each stand. I do everything I possibly can to make that stand the very best it can be. And then, I've got stands that I only hunt in early season. I've got stands I only hunt in the rut. I've got stands I only hunt mornings. I got stands I only hunt afternoons. I got stands I only hunt afternoons in the late season. And everything is dialed in as much as I can possibly dial it in. So if my scent is blowing onto the neighbors, I'm not expecting that buck to be on the neighbors. And I hope that doesn't sound like I'm dodging your question, but, everything is so specific that I'm not expecting a buck to walk by from any direction. When I see a buck, I'm expecting him to come from point A to point B, and when he does so, I'm expecting the wind to be at his advantage so he is comfortable doing that. And I'm setting it up so that when that happens, my scent is blowing where he can't smell it. So, everybody thinks a deer wants a nose wind. He wants to travel with that wind right in his nose. When he does that, how do you hunt him? Well, it's very difficult, if not impossible, but if that wind is quartering into, not coming straight in his nose, but if it's quartering into his nose, you can get off to this side of that trail. That deer can walk right down that trail with the wind quartering at a slight angle, and if you're on the right side of the trail, he can't smell you. And so if I'm expecting him to come from point A to point B, I'm expecting him to do that with a quartering nose wind, and I know which side of the trail to be on with that wind where he can't get me. Everything is calculated, And when you do that, it just totally changes the game.
Next question is, what's the biggest difference you've seen in as a buck gets older, from a 3.5 to a 4.5 to a 5.5 to 6.5? What are they learning? What do we need to know to go to that 5.5-year-old and start hunting those instead of the 3.5 and 4.5?
Well, first of all, they move a whole lot less in daylight. As they get older, the difference in a 3-year-old to a 5-year-old is just enormous. And they move a whole lot less in daylight, and when they do move in daylight, it's a calculated move for the most part. It's not just, hey, I'm hungry, I'm going to get up and waltz over to the food plot, and without regards to the wind. 3-year-olds are easy to kill. A 5-year-old, you gotta give him the wind, first of all. You got to make him comfortable. He can't know he's being hunted. If he knows he's being hunted, he'll lay there till dark. That's the big thing, is that they don't move in there as much in daylight, and when they do move, their moves are calculated. So your move needs to be calculated as well.
It's like boys chasing women when they're 16 years old versus 25 years old. They're a little bit smarter about it for the most part.
Yeah.
Maybe some aren't. I don't know. Maybe some aren't. We got to keep it family show, though.
Yeah. Well, we got some young bucks in here that might be able to educate us.
Yeah, might. Where's Al Foster when we need him tonight talking about that? Is he out on a date tonight?
He could be.
I don't know. We asked him that last night.
He's an old buck, though. Yeah. I hope he's making calculated moves, or he may get in trouble.
All right, well, we got time for one more question. Anybody got one? All right, here we go. Last question of the night. Oh, sorry. There you go.
This is Jerry again. I was wondering, you do you say like bucks from year to year, the yearly pattern. I hunt a lot of public land, and I know pressure is everything on that. But is that something you can actually predict on public land, or is that just a waste of time on public lands because of the pressure?
Well, I don't think it's a total waste of time. The big challenge is, well, two things. First of all, more often than not, that buck is not going to make it to the next year on public land. They just, such a high percentage of them get killed. The second thing is you got the challenge of another hunter coming in and ruining that annual pattern, if you will. So, maybe you've got a buck that's showing up on this isolated oak ridge that's hard to get to, feeding on acorns in mid-October. The following year, that buck, I believe, will be on that. If he's still alive, he'll be on that ridge in mid-October feeding on acorns if there's an acorn crop. However, if another hunter stumbles upon that oak ridge and bumps that buck, all that activity all of a sudden becomes nocturnal. That doesn't mean he's going to leave the country and totally change his pattern. It just means that he's a year older, he's a year wiser, and a lot of that activity is going to be nocturnal instead of during the daylight. So it's a much bigger challenge. There's absolutely no doubt about it. But I don't think that bucks change their home range over pressure. In fact, radio collared research has proven that. They don't go to a place they don't recognize or aren't familiar with, and because they ran out of someplace they are. They have found pockets within their home range where they feel safe. That's where they bed. So
continue to adapt to survive. That's what they're doing.
The pattern's not going to change, but it's just there's a whole lot of other factors working against you on public land.
All right. Well, that's a great question. We got I was a little worried this group was going to be a little quiet tonight, but big group. We got a full day ahead of us tomorrow. Hopefully all the rain moves through.
Yep.
And we'll be able to sit in here for a few hours and then take a couple walks on 2 different properties and look at 2 other ones from the road. So, Joe, thanks for sitting in with us tonight.
Well, I appreciate it. I'd like to make one comment about the chandelier.
Okay.
The chandelier is the antlers that I have found. I did not put the chandelier together. A fellow by the name of Richard Owens Chandelier donated his service with that too. So
thanks for clarifying that. But beautiful piece. Again, check out the Lester's Feet Raffle. We're going live this weekend, and the notes will be below in the content of both the podcast on podcast platforms and on YouTube. For all of our friends listening on MTech, make sure you get the May issue of the Busy Beaver. A Busy Beaver Extreme, and the tear-off mail-in tickets will be there for everybody. Outside of that, we're going to be back here next week again with our one of our last live audiences of the spring.
Yep.
And but we're looking forward to tomorrow. So with that, everybody, thanks for listening, and we'll see you back next week.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo, Via Farm Real Estate Company, 360 Hunting Blinds, Victory Chevrolet, Real World Wildlife Products, Matthews Archery, Novix Tree Stands, Gingerich Tree Farm, WildlifeFarming.com, Quiet Cat, and Vortex Optics. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.